Alright class, on the top of your paper write Science 7th 10.5 for Lesson 5 Unit 10. Today we'll be talking about ecological succession. So starting with your vocabulary and of course with the yellow highlighted, please write these down as you follow along will be the answer to the questions. So with the first one, the very complex stable environment that at last takes over the succession has replenished an area that is called a climax community. Next one. The normal gradual replacement of one community of an organism by another is called a succession. Anytime an area changes from one community of plants, and animals to another, it's experiencing succession. Ecological succession is normal. Gradual replacement of one community of an organism by another, succession is rarely fairly predictable process of communities growing and replacing one another, beginning with bare rocks or land and ending with a large variety of species that thrive in that place. Succession is one or more way that an ecosystem maintains a stable balance on Earth. It can be thought as a recovery process for the environment. If a large storm or fire destroys an area, succession can slowly restore it to its former health. A bare piece of land or an uninhabited body of water will not stay empty for long. It will soon be home once again to plants and animals. Even areas that have been cleared for buildings development can regrow vegetation if left alone. Succession begins with a bare piece of land or rock on which plants have never grown, or a place that has been recently devastated following a natural disaster. In many areas of the world, volcanic eruptions are a concern. Not only is a volcanic eruption dangerous when it occurs, but the lava from the eruption often destroys every living thing it touches. The first organism to grow in an uninhabited area of land is called pioneer species, because they are prepared the way for another species. In Unit 6, you will learn that mosses and pioneer species because they can grow directly on rocks. Lichens are the most common pioneer plants because they can grow without soil and can handle large amount of sun or rain. Once lichens have attached to the rock, it begins the process of forming new soil in that region. As the rock is broken down by erosion, the pioneer species die and add organic material to the broken down rock, forming soil. And it continues on with saying mosses and lichens and ferns die off and larger plants take over because the competition for water and sunlight is too much for them. So going on, primary succession, that it begins when no soil or living thing exists, when the natural disaster has reduced an area to bare rock. It's called primary succession. This process could take hundreds of years. Islands are good examples of primary successions. When small pieces of ground get thrust to the surface of a volcanic underwater, it can begin to experience primary succession. First, the water carries seeds of the pioneer plants to the rocks, which plant themselves and grow if sturdy or hard enough. Once the pioneer plant develop the soil, the plants begin to grow from seeds, the oceans, and birds carrying them to the island, and succession continues. Secondary succession, moving on, forming communities over the ground that once held life in somewhat easier and faster than starting with bare rock. Secondary succession occurs when life has only existed in that area but was destroyed for some reason and slowly makes its way back. Usually much of soil is left behind after a disaster and is capable of growing plants. Fire, volcanoes, large storms, or even man can be responsible for completely clearing an area of its living communities, but leave some soil behind. Although the place may look bare, it has probably still had seeds buried underground that will grow the same plants again. The only way to prevent this rebuilding of the original community is to continually kill off those species that are not wanted and to keep healthy those which are. Succession takes place in microhabitats, as well as an example of a microhabitat is a small plot of land that serves as a garden for growing plants. To begin a garden, a person clears an area of all existing plants. the area is enriched with fertile soil to provide a perfect environment for growing new plants. Succession occurs when a new plant grows in the place of an old plant. Often, unwanted plants called weeds begin growing along the garden plants. When this happens, the gardener pulls the weeds or uses chemicals to kill the weeds. Gardeners require regular tending to ensure that the weeds do not overtake the garden plants. However, when a garden is neglected, succession continues to occur as the plants that were originally presented in the plot of land. Climate community. Every ecosystem works towards the goal of a climate community. That is a very complex, stable work environment that at last takes over the succession and has replenished that area. Once an area has reached its climax, succession no longer takes place. The habitat that has formed into the final community with the species it needs to continue in that particular ecosystem. As a climax, the ecosystem stays the same forever or until some disaster destroys it. And then in the video it talks about forest fire and how that could rapidly destroy grasslands forming in that area, but it can replenish. And that seems to be it for lesson 5, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and if you have any questions, please let me know.